Hi, this is David Brennan with the Sword of David podcast, and I want to talk to you today about a topic that is very serious concerning the southern border. Now, everyone knows since Joe Biden took office in 2021 that between 11 and 15 million illegal entries have occurred at that southern border. But what a lot of people don't realize is just the extent of the danger that has entered the United States and how that is setting the stage for the fulfillment of a prophecy by the prophet Isaiah. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into the details of just how dangerous it is, what is taking place, what's coming into the United States through that southern border. But first, we're going to take a look at the words of Isaiah. And you judge for yourself. I will present to you the scriptural case that what's happening at the southern border of the United States and also the invasion of Western Europe, which makes perfect sense relative to the prophecy, that it does fit the prophecy and that we know then what's coming next. So let's take a look at that, pay close attention to some of the details. I don't play games, like just for those of you, this is your first time for this podcast, I take the scriptures literally as possible. I don't ignore aspects of them that don't fit with some theory I want to be true. I give it to you straight. And when you get it straight on this particular point, wow, look out. You talk about scary. Let's take a look at it. So we're going to take a look at what the prophet Isaiah has to say. Because what's taking place at the southern border, in my humble opinion, is fulfilling it. It's setting the stage for Isaiah's prophecy to fulfill on the United States of America and also Western Europe. Because the same thing that's been happening to the United States has been happening to Western Europe, where massive individuals from other lands are flooding into the country. Now, for those of you who understand Bible prophecy, you understand that the day of the Lord is the time of God's wrath. That is the end times. That's the technical phrase for the end times. For those of you who don't know much about Bible prophecy, which I think is a good number of you, then that term, just believe me, that is the end times. That's the technical term. 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 through 3 talks about the sudden destruction of the day of the Lord is the beginning by using a birth pangs reference. Birth pang references relative to the day of the Lord is the beginning of it. That's going to come in handy to understand what I'm going to read. I'm going to read to you what Isaiah in Isaiah 13 says. Now, the beginning of Isaiah 13, the first 3 verses, references back to ancient Babylon, but don't be thrown off by that. Because by verse 4, he now begins speaking about the day of the Lord. He shifts over. All that's taking place, and the prophets do this frequently, they'll take a look at an event that took place in the past, and they're comparing it to what's going to happen in the future. So the first 3 verses just reference ancient Babylon, but immediately shift away from it in verse 4 and go to the end time. So I'm going to read to you verse 4. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, that of many people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms and nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts musters the army for battle. So someone's hiding in the mountains. They're in the mountains. The mountains are a place to hide where you can't be found. Well, let's find out why in the next verse. Verse 5. They come from a far country. Okay, who? Well, they come from the end of heavens. The Lord and the weapons of his indignation to do what? Destroy the whole land. You have an army building up in the mountains. Why in the mountains? Because people don't identify them as an army. They're not an army marching through the streets of the United States or Western Europe. They're hiding in the proverbial mountains. But they're coming to destroy the whole land. Now, keep in mind, between 11 and 15 million illegal entries have taken place through that southern border. How big is the army? We're going to take a look at that in just a minute and see how the stage is being set perfectly for the fulfillment of those that come from a far country to destroy the whole land. It's going to be very, very rough. Now he tells us the time frame, the general time frame when this happens. Well, for the day of the Lord is at hand. He's talking about the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is the end times. But we need to identify more specifically when during the end times. And he's going to tell us it's right at the beginning that the attack takes place from those from a faraway country. So obviously they have to build up within the countries they're going to attack before that happens. And that's what's taking place in the United States, which again, we'll look at in just a minute. He gets into it by telling us, therefore, all hands will be limp, every man's heart will melt, and they will be afraid. This is the key. Pains and sorrows will take hold of them. They will be in pain as a woman in childbirth. That is what's called a prophetic birth pain statement. Now, there's a lot of bad teachings today by people who are prophecy lemmings, and they have big names. You've heard their names. I'm not going to go listing them all. You've heard their names, but they're prophecy lemmings who just repeat what each other says instead of looking at the details of what the prophets say. The fact is, when you read the prophets, birth pangs are the beginning of the end times. They launch the day of the Lord. 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 through 3. The sudden destruction of the day of the Lord is as travail upon a woman with child. That's birth pangs. So for those of you who are convinced birth pangs come before the day of the Lord, the end times begin, that is not the case. Birth pangs are the beginning of the end times. This is why so many bad teachings abound, because they've got you in birth pangs before the time. The stage is being set for birth pangs right now. Birth pangs are the beginning of the end times. But let's go on. That's a rabbit hole to go down. And we can one day. But then the prophet gets into the heavenly signs during the day of the Lord. It could be another rabbit trail. During the day of the Lord, there's certain specific heavenly signs, quote, conditions. Before the day of the Lord, there's a specific sign in the heavens. Distinction is that here, this is indicating during the day of the Lord. So now listen to what happens to those who attack the nations, those from faraway countries who enter these countries. They're hiding in the proverbial mountains, okay, so they can't be seen, which is exactly what is taking place. And we're going to get more into that in a moment. But what we're told is, in verse 14, it shall be as the hunted gazelle, and as a sheep that no man takes up. Well, a gazelle gets hunted, it's fleeing. And a sheep that no man protects by taking it up, it's highly vulnerable. Every man, they're talking about those from faraway lands who come into countries and attack them. And they're built up in the United States. And I'm going to show you how you know that and why this particular topic is the most important political, national security, and prophetic topic there is today. But you got to take the prophets literally, and that's not happening today, and a lot of these lemmings are missing it. But here you go. Every man will turn to his own people, and everyone will flee to his own land. In other words, after those from faraway countries attack, who have built up within the United States and Western Europe, and it will be a devastating attack because there's a massive number now within the country. Eventually, they will have to flee back to their own lands. Now we're going to take a look at just how serious the situation is within the United States because of the invasion at the southern border. Some things that many of you do not know about, and it's not going to be based on what I say, but I'm going to quote the experts and even President Trump. A letter was sent to Congress in January of 2024, in January of 2024 by 10 former senior executive FBI agents. And they know their stuff. What did they tell Congress? We're going to look at that in a moment, but essentially what you're going to hear, because I'm going to read excerpts from their letter. It's posted at the link below. You can check it out there. What you're going to hear is that enemy armies have entered the United States. That's not me saying it. That's 10 former senior executive FBI agents, top positions. They know their stuff, which of course is setting the stage for what Isaiah is warning us about. You've also got Gordon Chang, who's a China expert, written multiple books on China, the Chinese threat, and he said flat out on a television show in 2024 that China is sending an army, a military army into the United States through the southern border. Okay? China is also building infrastructure in Central America to help the flow come into the United States. China's in all-out war against the United States. Our country needs to wake up to that. Talk about Isaiah 13 being set up. Okay, President Trump at a campaign rally in 2024, during that election, he said, what is China doing? Are they trying to establish an army within the United States? He obviously is aware of what is taking place. Now, to put all this in perspective, remember, you have powerful political elements within the United States that have fought hard to keep the border wide open, and trust me, they know what's going on down there. They know an army's been coming in. And it's not just a Chinese army. It's also a massive terrorist army. And what's the deal with the drones? Are the drones, all these drones that have been flying around, what are they looking for? They're flying at nighttime. They can't see much. Are they sniffing out radioactive material? Did some of that come through the southern border? Listen to elements of this letter from the 10 former senior executive FBI agents, okay? In the beginning of it, they sent it to all the committee chairmen, okay? And then they sign it at the end. It's posted on the swordofdavid.com website, but also at the bottom of this podcast. You see the link to it. We write to express our concern about a current specific threat that may be one of the most pernicious ever to menace the United States. That is an understatement, to say the least. The threat we call out today is new and unfamiliar. In its modern history, the U.S. has never suffered an invasion of the homeland, and yet, we're talking about an invasion, and yet one is unfolding now. Listen to this. Military-aged men from across the globe, many from countries or regions not friendly to the United States, are landing in waves on our soil by the thousands, not splashing ashore from a ship or parachuting from a plane, but rather by foot across a border that basically is wide open, they say. They go on, it would be difficult to overstate the danger represented by the presence inside our borders of what, this will blow you away. This is 10 former senior executive FBI agents, not me saying it. Okay, again, look at the letter. It would be difficult to overstate the danger represented by the presence inside our borders of what is comparably a multi-division army of young single adult males from hostile nations and regions whose background and allegiance is completely unknown. You've got military divisions that have entered the United States of America through the southern border, but you also have an army of terrorists. Perhaps they're coordinating. Who knows at this point? Now listen to when the demographics of those coming across the border completely changed to young single males from hostile regions and countries, okay? You'll never guess. Yeah, early 2021 when Mr. Biden took power. In 2021, the demographics of those crossing the southern border started to shift. Young men from around the world traveling alone and holding questionable motivations dramatically increased. And it goes on giving you the description of these people. It's military-aged Chinese men. It's also from the Middle East. I mean, we have serious armies in the United States. My podcasts are going to be dedicated to this religiously now. There's a lot more to look at, trust me. I'm not going off. You can't cover it all in a single podcast, but I'll get to it eventually. It is stark to say so, but having a large number of young males now within our borders, they could begin attacking citizens. They start talking about the risk to the United States, attacking gatherings of citizens at malls, shutting down, destroying our infrastructure. I mean, think about that. They're already inside the United States. So when you look at Isaiah's prophecy, I hope you see what I'm talking about. Those from faraway countries have in fact entered the United States. Why isn't anyone talking about the connection to this prophecy? And it's because the prophecy lemmings keep repeating what each other says instead of taking the prophets literally. So I hope you have the fullness of what's taking place, and the next podcast, I'll cover more detail. There's a lot more events to take a look at. You just heard my dog in the background. But this podcast is dedicated to that. So I hope you'll consider subscribing. You really need to be up to speed on what is taking place. I personally don't play games. I give it to you straight. I do not sensationalize Bible prophecy or political events, but I try to give it to you as the prophet says, without regard to what these prophecy lemmings are saying. So God bless you. Until next time.